This series of videos is designed to assist players in learning LWRS or Bewegungskrieg. The training video is applicable to the standard version of LWRS and all reformatted versions of LWRS called Bewegungskrieg. Part 5 covers direct fire combat. Direct fire occurs during the combat phase. Some aircraft conduct air-to-ground attacks which are considered as direct fire combats, but these are covered in the various aircraft videos. Close combat is a type of direct fire, but this will not be covered in this video. Only ranged direct fire will be covered here. Infantry elements have a range of 6 cm against other infantry elements, guns or soft vehicles. There are no specific ranges for heavy weapons or machine guns, either anti-tank or anti-infantry using high explosive. This is limited by maximum visibility, which is 10 cm in standard terrain or 15 cm if in open terrain, such as desert or steppe. Infantry or heavy weapons do not possess anti-tank capacity at range unless armed with anti-tank missiles or ATGWs. The visibility ranges are displayed now. You can see there are 2 types of elements, vehicles and foot, which include towed guns, and the distance which they are visible are different. Vehicles are visible at a greater range than guns or infantry. There are 3 types of terrain, of which the most common will be standard and cluttered. It should be noted that infantry move a distance greater than their visibility range, which allows them to form up out of range and then move into contact with an enemy infantry element. This is not the case when armour is facing each other. In this case, there will always be some form of direct fire before one side closes to contact. The situation concerning anti-tank guns and tanks are interesting. If the tank forms up 10 cm away, they can be fired upon but cannot fire back. In this case, the tanks would need to form up 5 cm away in order to attack the anti-tank guns before coming into contact. The best option is to perform a second action in order to avoid direct fire before a close combat. There are no lines of sight rules in the standard version of LWRS, although it is implied when attempting to sight an element across difficult terrain types, such as cluttered terrain. There is an optional rule which allows for hills to block a line of sight, but apart from this, a line of sight is never blocked even by friendly or enemy elements. It should be noted there are no restrictions on firing through friendly or enemy elements in the standard rules. While I was tempted to add rules to cover this, after playing the game many times I realised they were not required, but it does take some getting used to. The basic 5-point values are infantry, 1 5-point, anti-tank guns, 2 5-points, and artillery, 3 5-points. In practice, the special rules are so extensive that the 5-point values will be modified often. In this case, it's best to cross-reference the standard 5-point values with these special conditions in a chart which is done here. Missing from this chart are vehicles, which have no fire combat values in the standard rules. Some nationalities mounted machine guns or other weapons onto a soft motor vehicle, in which case they would be treated as a heavy weapon for fire combat purposes and a vehicle for target purposes. There are 2 types of infantry, standard infantry with 1 5-point and heavy weapons with 2 5-points. Heavy weapons basically represent medium machine guns or possibly heavy machine guns. These weapons have no ability to affect armoured targets at a distance, but can otherwise use their base FP against other infantry, guns or soft vehicles. Thus, their range is basically limited to visibility rather than 6 cm. Guns, both towed or in vehicles, have 3 subclasses. These are guns with no high explosive, guns with high explosive, and guns with very effective high explosive. 2 cm cannons would typically have no high explosive, while 7.5 cm guns would have high explosive and 15 cm guns would have very effective high explosive. The 5 points available to use against infantry, including heavy weapons or guns, vary according to these types and range from 0 to 2 5-points. When targeting a soft vehicle, count it as a grade 0 armoured vehicle with a maximum possible 5-point value of 4. This is an optional rule and players may choose to use a different value, as this does give guns a powerful advantage. On the other hand, it's rare to account a soft vehicle unless a player makes a mistake. When firing in armoured vehicles, you compare the gun and armour grades. If the gun is 1 grade greater, the FP rises from 2 to 3. If it's 2 grades greater, then it gets 4 fire points or 4 dice. In the opposite direction, it drops to 1 fire point and then half a fire point. If firing at a soft vehicle, a grade 3 gets a +2, which means it gets 4 fire points. This is an optional rule, but it's one that I highly recommend. The rules do not make any difference between mounted or dismounted infantry. Motorised infantry are supposed to dismount before they get into contact, while troops in armoured vehicles fight with their vehicles. It's true that in many cases, infantry mounted in trucks will dismount 1 to 5 kilometres from the front line and move on foot, but in some cases the troops will fight in and around their vehicles. The Germans developed a number of specific combat transports to allow this, and the famous Jeep with a mounted machine gun was used by reconnaissance troops in the Allied forces. As a result of this, while not stated in the rules, players can choose how they wish to use their mounted troops. If mounted in non-combat transports, they can remain mounted until they get to within 10 centimetres of an enemy and then automatically dismount. From this point on, they are considered on foot and can only mount in their lorries when they are further than 10 centimetres from the enemy. If infantry are mounted in combat transport, they mount and dismount as required while moving or engaging in combat, irrespective of the distance to enemy elements. In summary, they always move as if mounted, fight as if dismounted, and are visible as if mounted. The only question is, what are they counted as when subject to enemy indirect or direct fire? My suggestion is this is determined by the owning player, but players may wish to implement rules which create some additional restrictions. While troops mounted in armoured transport will remain with their vehicles as per the standard rules in most cases, you may wish to dismount them and make them foot. I find that in defence they may be better off dismounted, as they can only be seen from 5 centimetres away instead of 10 centimetres. In the desert, this is a much more significant benefit. In the modern period, infantry and heavy weapons can be equipped with anti-tank missiles or ATGWs. These give infantry an anti-tank range and anti-tank capacity. Their effect against armour is similar to anti-tank guns, although some of the values are different, as can be seen here. These rules do not encourage the form up a line and fire at the enemy strategy, common in most micro-armour rules. These rules encourage close combat, with direct fire being used to support the close combat. In simple terms, direct fire is designed to support close combat, which is similar to artillery fire support and aircraft fire support. Let's try a line up and fire tactic. In this case, the Germans must move within visibility range of the Polish infantry, which is 5 centimetres, and open fire. The first question is, what stance do they need to get into to get to this position? Manoeuvre stance is not allowed within 10 centimetres of the enemy. Defend stance does not allow you to advance towards the enemy, so it must be attack stance. In attack stance, they must move forward at least 6 centimetres per turn, and they cannot deploy. In summary, it's only possible if you start 11 centimetres away, move 6 centimetres, and then change stance. If you fail to change stance, you are forced into close combat. If you do this, you are very foolish, as your troops are not deployed and the enemy probably are. You will lose this fire combat or even close assault combat, so you simply would not do it. Let's try the same experiment, but with 2 lines of troops. In this case, the front rank will move within 2 centimetres of the enemy infantry, and 2 ranks can fire. This could give you a victory eventually, but you will suffer more losses than the enemy. However, as you are under attack stance, you have a good chance of being forced to engage in close combat anyway. Inclusion, you will want to close into combat as soon as possible regardless, which will always result in less casualties and a quicker result. There is no point to form up a line and then just simply open fire at the enemy like a Napoleonic battle between 2 lines of troops. It just doesn't work in these rules. Let's try and attack with armoured forces. If your battalion was armoured, you would win, as the Polish cannot fire back with any effect. This is one reason why infantry should always have anti-tank guns. But even here, there is a good chance the tanks will be forced to close to combat anyway, where they can be affected. However, if they change stance to defence and then keep on firing until victory is achieved, they will win. It's just that it'll take a long time. Let's see what happens when tanks are opposing each other. If you have tanks opposing each other, the attacking tanks, in manoeuvre stance, can move to within visibility range and start firing. But as you can see here, the defender is in a good position to win, as the attacker can only use one battalion, and the defender is deployed and entrenched. If the attacker moves within 7 centimetres, then both lines can fire, and you probably will win. But you need to be in attack stance, and you need to be able to change to defence stance at the right time, otherwise it's another close combat. Once again, it's better to simply close the combat and be done with it. Direct fire at range is used to support a close combat. As direct fire can only be used once, you will know after one round of close combat if you have a chance of winning or not, and remain in close combat or withdraw accordingly. This is an excellent design feature, as when two sides are in a defensive position, there is no need to spend any game time on them. You can focus where something interesting is occurring. There is nothing more boring than having two lines of troops sniping at each other with little, if any, effect. This is one reason why games such as World in Flames are so popular. You are always doing interesting stuff, and only minimal, boring, attritive stuff. This concludes part 5 of my LWRS training video series. I have no idea what part 6 will be, but I'm sure it will be as good as this one. Denken Sie daran, immer für Ihr Heimatland zu kämpfen. Lightning War Red Storm was written by Andrew Stevenson. The current version, designed for both World War II and modern conflicts, is dated 2013. However, earlier versions were available as early as 2008. The rules use company-size elements, each consisting of 3 steps or strength points. These elements form battalions, and the basic combat unit is the battalion. The combat system uses a simple lots of D6 combat mechanism, and the sequence of play is an initiative-based movement phase system, followed by a fire phase. There is nothing revolutionary, but the package works very well. Bewegungskrieg version 1 is a reformatted version of the original rules with errata. Included are any corrections, additional numbering, updated tables, and additional cross-referencing. There is no changes to the original rules. All credits for the game design and rules go to Andrew Stevenson. Bewegungskrieg version 2 is an enhanced version of the original rules with errata. Included are any corrections, additional numbering, updated tables, and additional cross-referencing. Also included are optional rules such as terrain, weather, setup, or any other rules which fill gaps in the original rules. This version of the rules includes additional diagrams, figures, and commentary. The original rules are unchanged, but additional rules have been added to fill any gaps. Any credit for the game system and design goes to Andrew Stevenson. Allen guten Dingo, gehen zu Ende.